Okay, so you've shot some amazing footage on your iPhone and then you bring it into Premiere Pro and it looks awful. What is the problem? What you're dealing with here is that late model iPhones have a particular color space that they're working in that's not super compatible with Premiere Pro. And this, unfortunately, is part of the age old Apple and Adobe wars that have been going on for decades now. So there is a way to fix this footage so that it looks more true to the original recording. And we're going to look at two ways of doing that today: a simple solution that doesn't get you the best results, and then a slightly more complex solution that will get you a slightly better result. But you do need to know that you're never going to have it look quite as good as it does on the back of the phone screen. And the reason for that is that the phone has recorded much more data than the editing program is able to interpret. It's not that Premiere doesn't have the power to interpret all this data. It's just the way the color space has been set up on the phone isn't truly compatible with the way color spaces work in Premiere and in all other devices, including Android devices. So welcome to the wonderful world of shooting on Apple gear. This is part of some little tricky workarounds that you'll have to do when you work with iPhones. And it's just unfortunately the lay of the land as of 2022. So the phones that will be impacted by this is any phone that has a setting that allows you to shoot high quality Cine Vision or anything that says Dolby Vision in it. My understanding is that it's from iPhone's iPhone 11 Pro onwards. All of the Pro models will have this feature, and by default you'll be shooting in this really high color space. And then all of the later model, just regular iPhones, so I think 12 and 13 and probably 14 as well, have this. So if you're seeing this issue, footage looks great on your phone, looks terrible once you pull it into Premiere Pro, then you're shooting on one of those phones, and here is how you fix it. So here I've got some footage I recorded of some flooding on the Yarra River. I shot this on my iPhone 12. It's not a Pro model, but it does have this enhanced color space, which is the problem that is creating this disparity between the two looks here. So you can see I haven't done anything to the footage in Premiere. I've just opened it. And here in the source monitor, it looks quite different from the footage on my phone. So the colors are washed out. It's also overexposed. It's blown out. So there's a lot less information in these white patches in the picture here. And just generally, the picture looks much worse. So let's see what we can do to fix this footage. What we're actually looking at here is the amount of detail that's been recorded in the footage is not actually being correctly interpreted by Premiere. So there's a whole bunch of information up in this higher end of the scopes that's not actually being properly interpreted. So what we're going to do is overlay a different kind of image interpretation on the text, on the shot. And there's a couple of different ways we can do that, but I'm going to show you the quick way today, which gets almost as good a result as doing it the slow way. So I've just pulled that vision onto the timeline. So I've created a sequence with the same settings as the vision here. And I'm going to pop back to my source monitor to work here. I'm just going to open the effects rack here, and I'm searching for SDR. And this is an effect called SDR color form. So I'm just going to drag and drop that down onto my clip. So you can see straight away that the clip has changed color, and it now looks much worse in this window on the right. But you can also see that the color tones have started to come back closer to the original clip that I showed at the start of the video. So now I'm just going to pop up into my color grading workspace in the Lumetri color panel here and just do a couple of little tweaks. So I'm going to bring down the highlights. So that's darkened the overall shot a little bit and sort of making it, it's looking quite flat now. So I'm also going to bring down the blacks to try and bring a little bit more contrast back into the shot and bring down the shadows. So now the shot is starting to look much more like the original shot that I took on my phone. It's not quite as poppy. The colours, not quite as much of a dynamic range of colours, but it's much better than it originally was. And you can tweak these settings in the basic corrections in the color panel if you really want to get a slightly better result than this. But this is as close to the original as you can get. I'm now going to show you the trickier way of doing things, which allows Premiere to actually do the interpretation pretty much all on its own without the color grade. So I'm just going to delete that clip out of the timeline altogether. I'm going to right click here and open up this big menu. Now, it's really important that when you're doing this late in a project, you're actually right-clicking on the source footage, which will show up blue here if you're in the list view. If you're working in the thumbnail view, it's really easy to accidentally, so let's say I had this same footage on my timeline. It's really quite difficult to tell the difference between the timeline and the footage here in this view. So if you jump into list view, the footage is always blue, timelines are always, or sequences are always green. So I'm going to select my footage, right click, and then go to interpret footage. And there it is, interpret footage. Okay. And now I'm going to go into the color space that this footage has been interpreted in. And I'm going to change it from this use media color space Rec 2100 HLG and change it to Rec 709. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is change the sequence settings here so that I'm in Rec 709 color space. So you can already see that that's made a bit of a difference, but once again, it's not a great result. So now I need to change the sequence settings. So right click, whoops, that was my footage. I'm going to right click on my sequence here and go to sequence settings. Here in working color space, I'm going to change to Rec 709. Cool. So this is now looking much better than the previous interpretation of it, but it is still quite overexposed. So now I'm just again going to go into the Lumetri color panel and just in the basic correction up top here, I'm just going to bring the blacks down a bit. There we go. And bring down the highlights a little bit. Cool. So our shot's starting to look much nicer. You can also play around with bringing the shadows in a bit more. I might go even a bit harder with the blacks. Maybe even the shadows as well, just to add a bit more contrast. And then now that that shot's looking a little on the dark side, I might bring that exposure up just a teensy bit. So now you've got a much more true to the recording version of the shot there than your original. Okay, so that was 2 quick fixes for this problem. It's really helpful to fix this vision before you start editing. But if you're midway through a project and you've seen it and you need to fix it now, and you thought maybe that on export this would resolve itself, then using the marquee selection on your footage and having your bins managed really well is definitely the way forward here. So if you're working in that list view, it's really easy to tell the difference between footage and sequences, and you will need to select all of your footage and do that interpret footage step, or you can add the effect, the SDR effect to one clip, and then you can use the copy and paste attributes function to add that to all the other clips on your timeline. I hope this has been helpful and resolves any future dramas you have with your iPhone footage.